Hi there Year 10. So this week we're going to try something slightly different. We're going to work through this video together, and that's going to help you form your lesson for history this week. Okay, so what I'd need you to have is some paper and a pen. It doesn't have to be lined and it doesn't have to be a black pen. Whatever you've got in front of you is fine. Now you'll find this PowerPoint is on Show My Homework, so if you want to use it at the same time you can, but you only need the YouTube video which you're watching now and your pen and paper, and that is fine. So today's lesson is going to be on the Indian Rebellion. Now I want to start off by giving you some context. So we're starting in 1740. We're reminding ourselves that that is when the EIC, the East India Company, begins to take control of India. Okay, you can see that just here. Now, we know that in 1773 that changed. So what had happened was there'd been a battle at Plassey, and the British used that as a reason to say the EIC is not going to be able to to have control of India by itself. So what they do is they choose to share control of India. So it's controlled partly by the EIC and now partly with the British government. Now it's Warren Hastings, that we studied at the end of last lesson, who takes the control of the British government's side. Now, by 1857, which is where we're going to look at today, the British government have total control. They do not let the EIC have a look in. It is only the British government who are in control. And what they do is they appoint a viceroy. Now, a viceroy is the supreme leader who rules with the authority of the Queen. This is Queen Victoria at this point. We're going to have a look more at what a viceroy might mean later on. So, at any point in this video, you can pause it, write down what you're seeing, and make sure that you're taking notes so that you can understand. So if you want to pause it now, so that you can jot down the 3 different dates, what happens at each point, to show you how the British take control of India in a step-by-step way, then please pause the video right now. Okay, picking back up again. So what I want to do is I want to recap a little bit about this man who's called Warren Hastings. Okay, now we spent some time in last lesson writing down about 2 men, Robert Clive, who was famous early on when the East India Company just started to contact India, and Warren Hastings, who was famous later on when the East India Company started to lose their control and it was replaced by the British government. Now, Warren Hastings was an extremely wealthy Nabob. Now, Nabob is an EIC official. What he does is he starts to help to control British businesses through the EIC. However, when the British government started to share control of India with the EIC, he was given the position of Governor General. This put him in a really, really powerful position. Okay, so back in London, in Westminster, people thought that Hastings was becoming too powerful. So what happened to him was he was put on trial for corruption, as people thought he was using the power of the East India Company for his own benefit. You know, he was taking the money, he was becoming more powerful, more wealthy, and more strong as a result of it. He was found not guilty. You know, the court saw that he was innocent, but people did not trust him. This meant that the British government started to take more and more control of India. Now, the India Act in 1784 gave Parliament in Westminster joint control, as we were just saying, of British India within the EIC. Okay, so 1773 was when the process started, 1784 was when they had joint control. Now, if you want to return to your profile that you created on Warren Hastings last lesson, feel free. Pause the video and do so. Those of you who are staying with me, or who've picked back up again, we're now going to have a look at the causes of the Indian Rebellion, which happens in 1856 through to 1857. Now, as you can see on the slide, I've created a little table for you. What I want you to do is I want you to write a table into or onto your line paper, or the blank paper you've got in front of you, looking just like this. Now we're going to do the yellow section first, and then we're going to go on to the events and the consequences afterwards. So take your pen and write down in your first box all the causes you can read on this screen. I'll go through them with you. So it's 1856. You can see in this picture here we've got Indian soldiers who are working for the British. These guys are called sepoys, okay? They work for the EIC, which is a British company. Now, they find that the new Lee Enfield rifles that the British bring over have cartridges in them which are different to what they are before. Now, those cartridges are greased, they're lubricated, they've got oil on the outside of them, so they can slip down the gun and then be fired at the target. Okay? Now, that grease, it is rumoured, we don't know if it's true, it's all a rumour, but people say it's greased with cow and pork fat. The fat of beef or from a pig. Now, we know that that's going to be terrible because we know that to get the greasy, slippy cartridge case off, the Indian soldiers had to bite the end of the casing in their teeth and pull it off with their hand. Now, imagine that you are either Muslim or Hindu. You have to put the fat of a cow or a pig into your mouth and bite the cartridge so you can get the bullet out. Imagine if you're Muslim, you think pigs are dirty. You're not going to want to put that into your mouth. You imagine you're Hindu, you think cows are sacred. You're not going to want to put that into your mouth either. So what happens is those Indian sepoys refuse to use the new cartridges. Now, the British see that as a completely intolerant way to behave and as a rebellion. So, one cause is the new gun cartridges. A second cause is the British just don't understand. They don't think about the fact that the beef and the cow fat the beef and the pork fat is going to be such a big issue. So they're ignorant. So your second cause is the British being ignorant. Your third cause, the Indians for a long time had been really annoyed with the British, had begun to really get frustrated with the British taking control of land and trying to control them. Now, the doctrine of lapse is something that we mentioned before. What that was is when an Indian prince who died didn't have any sons, the British would just take over the land after they died. Now that meant the British were going to get more and more and more land, and nobody could do anything about it. So the Indians disliked that and disliked having no power, no chance to make their own decisions. They also hated the British dominance over their beliefs and culture. The British had started to ban something. It was called sooty. Now, sooty, it's a very gruesome story, was the process of a husband, when he died, let's say he was 50, and he'd married a very young wife. She was 13. If he died at 50, what she would have to do, as far as social norms went, is she'd have to show her grief by jumping onto his funeral pyre. So his body would be cremated, and she would be required, at the age of 13 maybe even younger, maybe a bit older, jumping onto his funeral pyre. Now, the British thought this was completely awful, barbaric, and they banned it. Whether or not you agree with that, many Indians disliked the British making that decision for them. Okay? And many Indians, if we have a look at this statistic at the bottom, 75% Hindu, 25% Muslim. That gives you an idea for why those new gun cartridges were going to cause such a problem. So, I hope that you've been pausing the video as I've been talking through this slide. If you haven't, pause it now and then use that time to write down in your causes section of your table everything that I've been talking about. If you need to remind yourself, the 5 bullet points are here on the screen. Okay, pause the video now then. And picking back up with you then. So what we're going to have a look at next is the next section of that table, the events. Can you see here I've highlighted this section of the table? We're now going to do that. So draw a line and start your new section. So we know that those new cartridges that were introduced in 1856 were going to cause huge problems. So the next year, some of those sepoys, the Indian soldiers who were working for the British, refused to use the new cartridges when they were ordered to do so. So what happens is they were court-martialed, and what that means is they were, essentially put in detention by the army. And court-martial means that you're taken in front of a court. You could be sentenced to prison, you could be stripped of your uniform, and you could be shackled at the ankles, handcuffs around your ankles. Or, if it was really bad, you could be executed. All right, so this was hidden from some British people. They didn't really see what was going on here. Now, what happened was the first rebellion, where they refused to use their cartridges, that inspired other rebellions. Those soldiers, those sepoys, shot every British man, woman and child in sight. In Cawnpore, a big city in India, there was 200 British women and children who were murdered. Now the news here started to get back to the British press, and they were outraged. So what that meant was Queen Victoria then started to order new soldiers from elsewhere in the British Empire, some of them in America, some of them on British soil, to be sent to India. Now 70,000 of those soldiers were sent to India armed with the latest Colt rifles that were made in America. These soldiers went to India, went to Cawnpore, and found their revenge for the innocent 200 British women and children who were murdered there. Use this time to plot in your notes into your event section. Once again, pause this video, and then I'll pick it back up again when we're ready to go through the consequences. Okay, so I hope you're still with me and you're getting a lot from this lesson. I'll give you a chance to give me some feedback by email or things to see if it works, if you want me to make any changes. But let's carry on with the consequences for now. So, Queen Victoria was really aware that she needed to make sure these new rebels were not going to rebel again. So whilst there were strict punishments, she didn't want to have too many of these strict punishments. However, her troops still wanted to have revenge, so what they did is they continued to execute thousands of sepoys and other Indians. Many of those were tied to the front of a cannon, and the cannon was set off, so the cannonball would literally explode through their stomach. One British soldier even wrote of a tree which had 103 sepoys hanging from its branches. Now remember, a sepoy is a soldier who's Indian who works for the EIC, the British. So one tree with 130 rebels hanging from it. This is brutal. The British would treat the Indians terribly, as we've just seen, but now they knew they had to be a little bit more careful with how they ruled India. They realised they were ignorant about the cartridges and the pig and the cow fat on them. So what Queen Victoria did was she appointed this viceroy, who I mentioned earlier. Now he would rule over India on her behalf, and he would try and make sure that he didn't end in this situation again. And what he tried to do was he tried to interfere less in India, so not going to stop those practices of sati, not going to stamp his ground and tell the Indians how to think. What he did instead was he gave many Indians a say in their government. Okay, so people were starting to be treated a bit better. Many Indians even went to university and started to think about how they would rule their own country. And that gave them more of an opportunity to have a fairer society in their country. Now use this time, once you pause the video once more, to fill out your consequence section. Okay, your last section in your table. Okay, I'm picking back up with you then. Now what I'd like you to do next, there's a video that's linked here on the screen. I want you to look at it really carefully and type it exactly into your browser header. Once you've clicked onto it and listened to it, I want you to add any causes, events or consequences that you've missed into your table. Okay, so you'll find a little bit about the Indian Mutiny, you'll find more about the practice of sati, you'll find more about the gun cartridges and Queen Victoria's palace that was built on the proceeds of what she got from India. Okay, so pause this video, go into your new YouTube video on another tab, so you can come back to this one, watch this clip here and fill out anything extra in your table. And I'll come back to you when we start talking about the benefits of the Indian Empire. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the impact of the British Empire on India. We're going to try and work out whether it was a positive or a negative. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you two bits of information. One is this one here, which is a table I want you to fill out with all the different changes that happened to India because of the British Empire. The second bit of information is not on the slide, but I will make sure it's available to you on Show My Homework. It will be a picture of some notes I want you to take down. So what you need to do, you need to fill out this table, take the notes from the picture I'm going to put on Show My Homework for you, and find out what the impact of the British Empire was on India. Once you've finished, come back to this slide and we'll go through the positive and the negative impacts of the British Empire in India. Okay, so I hope you've paused your video, used the information on Show My Homework to write down the impacts of the empire on India. Now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the positive and the negative impacts. Now here is when, if you have a highlighter and you have two different colours of a highlighter, then wonderful. Take those out and make sure that you're ready to highlight the positive and then highlight the negative in a different colour. If you don't have a highlighter, don't worry. What I suggest you do is you make sure that you've got your pen and you underline where you see something positive and you make a circle when you see something negative. Make sure you've written next door what the underline means and what the circle means, so you know what you mean when you come back to it. So if you have a look at the economic resources section, British businessmen made lots of money. India was able to make lots of money as well through trading of tea, £30 million a year that was made. Many Indians gained jobs through the shipping and many made money through trading and sales. The British also improved things in India. Irrigation, that means that there's lots more water being made available for farmers and rural communities in the countryside. They also developed coal mining in India, which was something that never existed before. Now, all these things are positive things. However, one big underlying negative thing is that many of those British just abused the position. They took the money for themselves and didn't necessarily go back and improve the life of the Indian people. So, pause the video now, go back through your notes, highlight where you see something positive, highlight when you see something negative, and then, if you've missed something, please just go back through and add as you go. When we're looking at the building factories section, we know that factories were built in India that helped to make goods such as cotton, cloth and flour. Again, the British owned the factories and mills, which gave work to the Indians. So I'd take your positive highlighter or your underlining and just underline this as a positive. Many of those goods that were made in India were shipped back to Britain and then maybe made into something in Britain and then sent back to India as a finished product for the Indians to buy. Now that meant they were often more expensive because they'd travelled all the way from India to Britain and back again. So the Indians often missed out on that as well because they weren't able to pay a small amount of money. Now we're going to look at the communications, the railways and the transport changes. So a really big positive thing here, 30,000 kilometres and 130,000 bridges were built all across India. People could travel really far. The British invested 400 million by 1914. We've got lots and lots of money, lots of investment being made. Often this was done, people argue, that so the British could gain more control of India and they didn't really think about leaving the money there. They took the money back to Britain. However, the train lines are still used today, so some argue simply that actually it's something that's a good thing, a positive impact, because the railways are still in use today, even if, as we've seen from some of the pictures on the internet with the lockdown happening in India, they're completely overrun, have too many people for such a small space. So pause the video once more, highlight or underline, depending on what resources you have in front of you, to jot down the positive and negative impacts of the British Empire on India. So the two more sections we're going to do, we're going to talk about the healthcare that's improved, and then we're going to talk about culture, society, and how law and education has improved. So health. British do some pretty good things here. They introduced a vaccine treatment programme, they try and stop malaria, smallpox, sewage systems are introduced, water supplies are improved. So life expectancy for Indians raises. Brilliant, great, this is all positive news. However, we have famines all throughout India. People blame the British because they forced Indians to replace the food crops such as rice and wheat, with high value crops that the British could sell, but the Indians couldn't eat. So they wanted cotton, they wanted tea, they wanted oil seeds. The Indians can't eat these. So that meant that people started to starve, and there was a seriously negative impact of the British Empire in India. So once more, pause what I've just said here, highlight or underline as you go. And we'll finally move on to culture and society. This is the last little bit we'll do today. So the British created a legal system in India that was based on British law. Now, British law, we can be very confident with, is one of the best institutions for law in the entire world. So that meant that the legal system for those Indians were able to be much more fair, and that meant that the people were treated much better. Hindu and Muslim judges made sure the British did not forget their traditions and customs, which meant that they were treated much better than they had been, especially in the lead up to the Indian Mutiny. The British helped with education. Thousands of schools and colleges opened, universities as well. Okay, this meant that the Indians developed a much more modern, democratic, liberal views. The new knowledge in science and humanities also opened them up, and it gave them an opportunity to study in Britain. Now we're going to look at a character called Gandhi later on in our unit, and he was one of the people who benefited from this. He was able to move to England to study law at an English university, and then go back to India and use his knowledge to help his citizens in his country. So once more, and for the final time for this task, pause the video, highlight your positive and your negative impacts here, and once you have done, come back with me and we'll do the final task for today. So our final task for today is to talk about the significance of the Indian Rebellion in the form of an exam question. Now this is an 8-mark question. It will take you 10 minutes. I want you to send me this, either on Show My Homework, just as an upload. You can take a photo of the work you've written on your pad, in your exercise book, on your piece of paper, or if it's easier, you can write it on Microsoft Word using the school's OneDrive portal on Microsoft Teams, or if you'd rather, you can just type it straight onto this PowerPoint and send this straight back to me. Okay, the PowerPoint will be on Show My Homework. Now what I'd like you to do is I want you to write 2 paragraphs. For the significance question, you can write the short-term impact and the long-term impact. You've got some sentence starters on the screen there for you. For the first short-term impact, I suggest you write something about the immediate death toll. So there are sepoys who refused to bite the gun cartridges, rebelled immediately, and then we have thousands dying. I want you to talk about this developing British Empire. What did Queen Victoria decide to do as a result of this? Well, she sent 70,000 troops across, didn't she? And that helped her gain more control. Now I want you to think about the long-term impact. Now the long-term impact is where you're going to think about for this one is much more of what we've done just now. So we were talking about the Indians benefiting from the British Empire. So you can use some of the evidence you picked up here. So for example, a long-term impact of the rebellion was that the British took more control. Now there will be a viceroy in India. This developed the British Empire in India because we have 400 million being spent on railways. We have 30,000 kilometres being built of railways. We've got industry being developed, we've got factories being developed, we've got vaccines being developed. People are living longer lives, however famine is happening. Okay, so just to recap then, your short-term impact, look at the rebellion and exactly when it happens. Think about what happens directly after that. Queen Victoria is sending in her troops because she's outraged at the 200 women and children who are massacred at Cawnpore. Your second paragraph, your long-term impact. Think more about what's happened over time. Think about how people's lives have improved or perhaps still been suffering. Now once you finish this, as I said, either send it to me by email, that's m.slater@wcsch, or you can send it to your subject teacher if I am not teaching you normally in school. If you don't want to, if you find that difficult, if that doesn't work, you can upload it to Show My Homework. You can upload it using a photograph. You can upload it on a Word document, on a PowerPoint slide, however you want. Your notes for this lesson, keep them safe because we will use them when we come back to school and we will use them with our revision in the longer term. Now, please do let me know if you have any feedback, if this lesson has been useful for you, and if you think we could change it in the future and do something different. I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses, because I'm trying to make this as close to a lesson as possible, but it's very difficult to do so without any feedback from you. So please do let me know what works, what you think could be improved, and what could be different. Okay, good luck with your work.